There we go. Hello. Welcome to another Mental Health Monday. Appreciate you guys being here. I missed the one last week, so I'm glad to be here for this week. I was traveling last week, so it's nice to be back. And we've got a great topic for tonight. And I would like to say welcome to Sean Robinson. Thank you so much for being here, Sean. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to get into this conversation and to be here.
Yeah. Oh, I just remembered. I knew I was forgetting something. Okay, I'm going to open up a question queue. Y'all kind of already know how this goes, but if you have any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat. I'll go ahead and get that open. And if you have any questions, you can put them in there. If you're here on Twitch, if you're here on YouTube, just pop them into the chat, and I'll keep an eye out for them, and we'll do it that way, and we'll be just fine. But our topic tonight is overcoming habitual drinking, and I'm excited to get into this one. But before we really get into it, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Sean. Sean is a 39-year-old, which I'm 38, so we're like right there, author, speaker, and motivator who focuses on self-improvement, mindset shifting, and habit forming. He works in the construction industry and is a volunteer firefighter, which, as y'all know, that's like near and dear to my heart as well, and lives with his wife and 3 children in Ontario, Canada. He wrote a book called Going Dry: My Path to Overcoming Habitual Drinking. And that's his first book. And I'll share a link to that here in just a minute. At one time in his life, Sean was angry, overweight, drinking too much, and not the person he wanted to be. There were various reasons for those issues, but if you had to sum them up, it was that he never really believed he was capable of anything different. Sean was raised a certain way, and we're going to talk about that a little bit tonight, and started to form different beliefs and habits that seemed really impossible to break. And this is not some magical story of transformation where someone went on a quest to find themselves. Not that there's anything wrong with that. There was no spiritual awakening or near-death experience that prompted the change. Sean was just a person who eventually realized life could be better than what it was. He realized he could be a better person, husband, and dad than he had been. And through thoughtfulness, dedication, and hard work, he turned his life around. Now, with that intro, I do have some socials, some websites. Like I said, that book link, all of that is coming at you via the chat. So make sure you check those out. One more group of links here, because YouTube specifically is like, don't give me too much at a time. But with that intro, with that opener, again, Sean, thank you for taking the time to share your story with us. I think it's really important to hear from people who have these stories to share. So thank you again just for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. Like I said, I'm excited to be here and ready to dive in.
Yeah. Now, I mentioned your age at the top of that. You're only 39. You've already accomplished and you've already been involved in a lot. My question is, when you were a kid, is this what you had envisioned your head? Did you see yourself being a construction worker and a firefighter and an author and a speaker? Is that what you had in mind for adult life?
No, to be short, I would have never thought, especially the author bit, because just the environment I grew up in, I just wasn't, very confident, especially to talk to like other people to share. I was pretty shy when I was younger, and even still into adulthood, but something that I kind of learned how to manage and yeah, no, so a lot of these things just kind of happened, right? There was my dad's a mechanic, and I kind of thought I'd end up doing something in the trades, just with that environment growing up, helping him in the garage or just learning different things. He was also on a volunteer fire department, so that kind of it surprised me, and we could get into that when my opportunity came up because it was never something I thought of. But it doesn't surprise me that I've ended up kind of doing these things with where I came from.
Yeah. I mean, do you view like construction kind of that extension of being a mechanic, just like a sideways path to that or
Yeah, yeah, kind of, because when I was helping in the garage and when I started getting to the age of having my own vehicles and things, like I work on my own stuff, and it was always the oldest, biggest piece of shit, like cheapest thing possible. So whenever I did any kind of repair on it, I needed to do three other things because bolts would break, parts would break. So, and then just getting your hands in the tightest of spots, I knew quickly I did not want to be a mechanic. I did not want to do that forever. And the amount of tools that my dad had and mechanics have, I just knew that wasn't something I wanted to do. So
Mm-hmm.
I just when it came to the point after I was done some other college and taking some law and security stuff and I came back to the trades, it was like, which one of these did I want to do? And I kind of did a process of elimination and really it was because I got more involved with the fire department at the time and
Mm.
thought that's what I wanted to do full time. So what could I do to complement that? And I thought electricity and being an electrician was something, and it was something that always interested me. So, using the tech background of being a mechanic kind of drove me into being an electrician.
Yeah. So my dad is a retired fireman. My grandfather was a retired fireman, and both of them had like side jobs. So one of them had a cabinetry company and then a moving company. And then my dad had a remodeling business. And so it seems very common for firefighters to have like a second job that they do because a lot of the times they work like 24 or 48. And so, yeah, it like you're right. An electrician or something like that would totally complement that schedule and that flexibility that you get a little bit being a firefighter. So how did you decide to go construction side instead of firefighter side?
Well, so right out of high school, I got the usual you can't stay home unless you're working or going to school.
Ah.
And my dad actually worked at a local community college and got a discounted tuition. So
Mhm.
basically, it was like if you're not working, you're going to college. So I had to pick something and thought I wanted to get into something to do with law. I didn't want to be a
Mm.
police officer, but just something. So I took a law and security program and didn't really like. I got into basically security side because you can kind of go into different areas. And when I got finished that program, I had already been a volunteer for going into 3 years
Mhm.
and wanted to do that. But I didn't want the cost of going and taking a pre-service fire course or something because I'd already just paid for, even though it was discount, it was still expensive.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to go back and pay for school. So thinking about how I could kind of make this work in the form of an apprenticeship, because I started my electrical apprenticeship, I thought, well, why don't I just continue doing the volunteer, and I took every course that I could, and just thought I could work through both these things at the same time, get more experience firefighting, and also get my ticket, and then be to a point where I could just kind of make both work, right? Do like you said,
Yeah.
have one with the other as the backup.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's great how life kind of just guides you that way and pushes you in one direction or the other, and sometimes it feels like the right decision all along, like you don't know what you don't know until you're already in it sometimes. So yeah, I appreciate that. Appreciate that background. Fire, like I said, firemen are near and dear to my heart, and I also work in the construction industry. So it's like all these things. So I'm here with you. Now we've got a great question in the chat. This one comes from Bite Mark, and she would like to know, what is your favorite poem?
I thought about because while I got into writing and into read a lot more reading, um, I couldn't think of my favorite one. But so when I looked it up, it's called "You Can," and it's by Walter D. Wintle. And I have it open if you want me to read it.
Yeah, I would love that.
So if you think you're beaten, you are. If you think you dare not, you don't. If you like to win but think you can't, it's almost a cinch you won't. If you think you'll lose, you're lost. For out in the world you'll find success begins a fellow's will. It's all in a state of mind. If you think you're outclassed, you are. You've got to think high to rise. You've got to be sure of yourself before you can ever win the prize. Life's battles don't always go to the stronger or faster man, but sooner or later, the one who wins is the one who thinks he can.
I I love that. I appreciate you reading that also, like because this is something that I just told my 10-year-old, I think literally yesterday. Because he was saying something about I can't, I can't, I can't. And I was like, you're right. You're right. If you say you can't, then you
Mm,
absolutely can't. That's it. You're done.
yep.
So we
Yeah,
had, and then we had the rest of the conversation that goes along with that. But it was just like that moment of, hey, that's your mindset, man.
yeah. And just to simplify it, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Yep, exactly, exactly. Yeah. I love that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Now,
Great question.
yeah, to kind of go on the opposite side of poetry, I guess this is one of our favorite questions here, and I don't know how, but somehow mental health and true crime goes together because it just seems to fit every time. But do you have a true crime or serial killer story that fascinates you?
Um, I do, and really, it's because it happened in my backyard, essentially. So where I'm from in Ontario, right near a big Canadian Air Force base, and there was a commander there that he basically had a double life. And while he was the commander of this base, he was doing some nasty things in the background, and stalking, and he had, I think he was up to two or three people that he had killed, and there was a
Wow.
really big, really big, because it was right in this area. So people knew some victims, and it was just a massive thing in the news. And just because of the high profile of this person, and kind of what he did, and all across the different places in Canada, and just the whole story was pretty fascinating. So that was one that sticks out for me for sure.
I mean, it's fascinating to um, think about what people hide and what they do in their daily lives, because most of the people who do these heinous things have these daily lives where you would think, oh, not that person, not him,
Mhm.
not her, like that's not a thing. And then it all comes out and it's like, oh shit. Yeah, totally him, totally
Mhm.
her.
Yeah, and then this person, like, you found out kind of later that he went to school or college with another high-profile Canadian serial killer, Paul Bernardo. So it
Oh
was it
wow.
was kind of like a whole circle, and it was unrelated, but just the fact that they knew each other at one time was kind of creepy.
Yeah. Now, so I'm looking up. Did you say he was with the Royal Canadian Air Force? Is that the right one that I'm?
Uh, yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
Russell Williams.
Yes. Yep. That's the one I was just looking up. So if anybody wants to read more about that, I'm gonna post a link for you in the chat. You're welcome to go read to your heart's content on Wiki, because that's where we find all of our information these days. So tonight's topic is your kind of personal journey and story of overcoming habitual drinking. So can you share more a little bit about kind of your personal journey, what led you to change your lifestyle and habits, and just kind of how did you get where you are today?
Yeah, so basically, we talked about my dad in the garage, and I grew up in an environment. My parents were young. They were 20 when they were married at 20, had me when they were 21. Just a young lifestyle. This was mid 80s, and just partying all the time. Right? It was safe. There was no, I didn't, was never in any kind of danger. But yeah, alcohol was around all the time. I have two younger brothers. We grew up in an environment where it was normal, grab drinks. I knew how to mix a drink when I was, 8 years old. And we played games the next day of helping clean up and counting all the empties and helping carry it back to get the deposits. And it was just a normal thing to have around.
Mm-hmm.
And even as far as like keeping stock and offering and hosting and all of the cheers or salutes or different forms of celebration tied to it, it was just very much ingrained in me from such a young age. And in that environment, like, I don't know how they're feeling the next day. I don't know how, like, any of that, because like we
Yeah.
weren't drinking, but it was just a normal thing. um in that environment, there was a lot of moments that we grow up basically walking on eggshells in the morning. My brothers and I learned that if we learned how to make coffee as well as we made, the drinks the night before, it was going to be a lot easier for us in the morning.
Oh wow.
Um, different instances where patience levels were just not there, and
Yeah.
we're just doing what we can to stay out of the way. And the same patience levels when we're doing helping outside the next day or whatever. And it's like, we just know that that hangover, didn't know at the time, but thinking back from my own experiences, I just know that like we were holding ourselves in a defensive state a lot of the time, rather than being any kind of reason to make them upset or bring anything. So keeping the negative stuff aside, I didn't know that as I created my own habits, but as I grew up, I maintained a stock. I maintained, a hosting environment. I had similar lifestyle. It just created my own habits based on what I witnessed and what I saw and what I was a part of, from a young sponge age. And basically, as I got older through college and just had these things, Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights was what I knew, and Sundays, like whatever day of the week. So as I grew up, I kind of maintained this and different, construction. As I got into working construction, it is just normal. You go out and you drink with your, coworkers or your other friends, and you're talking about it in the trailer when you get back to the site, and everybody's sharing their hangover stories. And it's like your trophies from the weekend. You get to have these moments and these stories. And I had my share, and I didn't trust any of my friends, so I was always the last one up. And it just was more time for me to keep drinking. And it got to a point, I've always had a problem with my weight. Just environment never really, even though Dad was on the fire department, I didn't see him doing any extra exercise, or he was part of a beer league hockey team. It's a social drinking thing, same as the baseball team I saw him on. It was just very much around drinking versus the exercise. So I had an awful diet. I had awful weight, and I was always up and down. And basically what it got to was at the end of 2020, COVID first year in Ontario, we had almost everything shut down, probably more so than other places, but I know it affected everybody the way that it did. And for me, an already bad drinking routine got that much worse.
Yeah.
I even the fire department, we weren't doing our training anymore because they didn't know what they were dealing with. So we were just told to only go if it was an emergency. And on a volunteer department, there's usually not that many calls, right? Depends on the municipality or the county. But so I was just drinking a lot more. I wasn't going out. We were working from home, or we weren't. So it was already bad. And by the end of 2020, I just got to a point. I was 320 pounds. This like series of drinking routines had gotten to a point. I was just feeling physically, mentally miserable, and really just wanted something to change. And I was very, in a construction environment, and just my upbringing, it was very like masculine and just fix it yourself and do it yourself and suck it up and be a man, and all of those things kind of going through my mind from, growing up in the garage, trying to hold the flashlight, never being in the right place, to my own experience with working with, who I was working with or for, and, just the dominant masculine environments. And like, I just didn't feel like I could talk about it. I could open up about it. I could ask questions. I could go to somebody. It was just like, I had to fix it myself, but I didn't know how to do that. I thought I did, or I told myself I thought I did. So by the end of 2020, I got to a place where I took a notebook and I just started venting. I just started writing things down. And I did it in a way that was an outlet for me, but it was because I just didn't feel like anyone around me could handle the negativity, the cynicism, the version that they were getting, because everything irritated me, everything pissed me off, and everything was someone else's fault. So taking to that journal, putting those thoughts down, and then just kind of carrying that on as the end of 2020, New Year's Eve came and went. I wanted something to change, and I just needed, and at first I thought it was just like 320 pounds was pretty depressing for me. I'd never been that high, and while I still was on the fire department and I had this physical job, it was like I just needed to get feeling better. So I thought, what could I do in 2021 to start feeling better? And I took that venting that I did in that book and decided to just keep writing about it. But then dry January came up, and it was like, I'm gonna do dry January, and I'm gonna do it because I want to start feeling better. I want to start losing weight. I
Mm.
hadn't even thought about my drinking habits and my drinking routine at that time because I just didn't realize it was as toxic for me as it was. I didn't realize that this routine that I knew forever was as bad as it was for me. And while I never felt like it was an addiction or it was any of that, even though I'd learned later it was, you know, there was a lot of similarities, it was more from a place of just changing something I was so used to doing that just didn't seem like something I could be without.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, you talked about a lot there, but especially COVID and the way that some people coped with that was to turn to drinking. And it's one of those things that it's like, I'm not saying there was a right or wrong way to cope with a worldwide pandemic or to cope with any shit that you go through in your regular life. But yeah, you kind of don't realize that it's a problem until you stop it for one reason or another. You're out of that environment because you're traveling somewhere, or you do something like dry January, or whatever it is that is kind of that like, oh, that's part of the problem. But you have to be a little bit snapped out of it in some sort of way before you can say connect those dots a little bit.
Yeah. And in the beginning, like COVID, my friends group and I was making games out of it, right? It was fun
Yeah.
to have games nights over Zoom or
Mhm.
Discord or somewhere, and you're playing these drinking games over Discord or Zoom. So you're playing these drinking games because you're not allowed to go anywhere,
Yeah.
or you're not supposed to go out. So what else is so like in the beginning where it's like fun and games, and like I found my problem with drinking was always when I went to go to a function or it was a Friday night and we were out with the guys or whatever it wasn't an everyday thing. It was more because I was out and my wife was driving home, or it was at my place, or it was like, especially COVID where like we couldn't go anywhere and we're doing this Zoom thing.
Mhm.
So it was fine to have a bunch of drinks because it was a Tuesday night, because what are we going to do tomorrow?
Yeah.
It just made an already bad routine that much worse.
Yeah, yeah. And like I said, there's so many things that I would love to kind of pick on in your story, not in a bad way, but in like let's talk about that kind of way, because we're the same age, essentially. You're a little older, that's okay. But I grew up in the 80s as well, and yeah, it wasn't a big deal for there to be wine glasses or beer bottles or whatever. It's just kind of no one really thought about it. And now, like, there might be a wine bottle or something in the kitchen, but it's usually corked, and I don't just leave it out. And it was a different mentality at that time, for sure. And with one parent in construction and firefighting, and then one parent for me also who worked at a gym as a personal trainer, it's like there was a lot of just, they were doing everything they could. They were also very young parents. They were doing everything that they could to make it through, I feel like. And I think a lot of that was coping for them too. But also because they were such young parents. Like, my mom had me when she was 17. And so she missed out on like her early adult life and doing all the things that you do in your early adult life. And so I think some of it when I was growing up might have been a little bit of making up for that. Not to bag on my mom, because I love both of my parents very, very much, but it's just kind of the reality that it was. And when you grow up like that, when you grow up seeing these specific behaviors and these specific patterns, it's it's almost impossible not to just feel like that's how it's done. That's the norm. Like, that's what I grew up with. It's what I'm comfortable with. It's kind of just one of those things. It's like, it is what it is. And again, until you're shaken out of it, like, it's hard to break a habit until you're already shaken out of it, or you're faced with something. You're faced with something big that causes you to change.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to give my parents trouble or to call them out for something that
Yeah,
they could have
yeah,
done better, because like we are just all trying to figure this out, right? So I don't think my parents would have done anything to hurt me or my
yeah,
brothers, in that environment. So like this isn't about to call out on, this bad childhood, because
yeah.
especially as I've learned, there's a lot of what we become responsible for as soon as, like we get to a certain point, right? At some
Hmm.
point, it's up to us to do something about it if we don't like it.
Yeah.
And that's a big realization. That's a hard thing to come to terms with. And in that environment, talking back with like the way my upbringing was, it was like, how are we supposed to know any different? We
Hmm.
have to believe that the people looking after us are doing things right. We don't know that they're just trying to figure it out until we get to a point later, right? Like we don't realize
Yeah.
that in the moment. We feel like this is truth.
Hmm. I asked my mom just recently, I was like, did you ever feel like you were totally lost and confused and didn't know what you were doing as a parent? Because I feel like that sometimes. And she's like, duh, every day.
See, right?
And it was my dad walked in like halfway through that conversation. He was like, no, your mom had it together. I'm the one who felt like that. I was like, okay. All right. Just making sure it's not just like I didn't miss something. Some adult toolkit that I forgot to pick up at the store.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I'm making mistakes. I'm sure you're making mistakes. Every parent is out there making mistakes, and that doesn't mean that we're doing anything harmful on purpose, but I mean, someone has to fuel the books, right?
Yeah,
Something has
that's
to go
right.
into those backgrounds that fuel the books. But yeah, it's not to. You're right. It's not to say like this is all someone else's fault. It's just to say this was the background, and this is kind of where it was established as it was part of what went into it. So I appreciate you going into that a little bit. So you went through dry January. What were some of the was that well, let me start first. Was that the first time that you had considered not drinking?
Uh, for the most part, I mean, I did it before, but it was kind of just in like there'd be times where I'd go a couple weeks, a month or so, and not have a beer, and then there'd be times where it was like Friday, Saturday, Sunday night. Like it that kind of depended on
Yeah.
what was going on. But that was the first time I really committed to and then stuck to the full month. Because
Mhm.
when I tried dry January before, it was very passive. It was like because other people were doing it. And then at the first sign of, a function, it was like, oh yeah, I want one. I made it a couple weeks this time. That's perfect.
Yeah.
And this time was so different because at 320 pounds, I just felt so depressed at the end of that year, 2020, and was that like I call my rock bottom.
Mhm.
Everybody has a different, I think, a different definition of that, and
Yeah.
and it was my lowest. It was my lowest point. The way I felt, the way I was with a lot of my attitude and things. It was a really hard time, and as I got into January and tried this dry January, it meant something to me to do it longer than I did before. And getting through that first couple weeks and seeing people around me, and I had committed to it on my own this time, but there was people around me doing their thing again. And when
Yeah.
when it got through to that second week again, it was like, no, I committed to the month, and they were like, oh, but you made it, you're good, you got 2 weeks. Like, no, like this is important to me this time.
Mhm.
And I got to the end of January and really really felt the pressure near the end of the last third and fourth week, because those other people had gone back to that old routine that I knew so well. And found the real challenge start about that February, because I got into February. I'm like, you know what, like I just don't feel like that's enough. I don't feel like 30 days is enough. So
Yeah.
dry February is a thing. I thought, like, I'm going to commit to February. It's a short month. Like, just keep kind of this momentum going. And, you know, at this point, because I was always, this construction, I don't read, I'm, self-help, no thanks. That's for somebody else. I got to toughen up, be a man, suck it up. So like, I just didn't think to go to these places because I'm 36 or whatever at the time. Like, I'm just supposed to know how to do all this stuff. I'm an adult now. I have to just know these things. And that's such a terrible statement, but that just didn't know any different. So, as January finished, I started opening up to podcasts, something that I never thought was for me. Started to read some books, started to, I kept journaling. I kept writing down in this book and just outlining these thoughts, and it went from a place where I was beating myself up and calling myself out and belittling myself to a point where I could like document how I was feeling, and what was working and what wasn't working, and what I was trying
Mm-hmm.
and doing and not doing, and different pressures from outside, and friends things and whatever. And it really gave me that much more support to keep trying new things that I didn't do before, and to keep going. And nearing that end of February, I started getting into like the School of Greatness and Ed Milet and different podcasts that were all about inspirational stuff, and really finding more information that I didn't know before. And I would have never found it if I didn't open up and be more growth minded.
Yeah.
Because I was fixed before. Like it just wasn't something that I would have ever done.
Yeah. And that pressure, especially if you're doing something like Dry January, because that just the name Dry January kind of indicates an end to it, right? It's like, oh, well, it's no longer January. Now you're going to come have a drink with us. Like that's got that pressure has to be really really difficult to like get through and kind of get to the other side of and make sure that you're doing what's right for you and not just doing something because that's what other people expect of you.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced when you were starting your journey? And I guess that's kind of both internally and externally. And I heard you mention, kind of didn't know you didn't pick up that adult toolkit at the grocery store. So you're kind of in that thing of like, I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do. Were those the biggest challenges, or were there some other ones for you?
Um, I think those were some of the bigger ones. Is
Mm,
just realizing that I needed the help.
yeah.
That I didn't know that I and and I guess I didn't appreciate that I just there no one said that I had to know these things. It was just how I felt. It was just like a feeling that I created because of the environment I was in, or the people I was around, or just the situation that said like the only way you can do these things is if you already know them. You can't be good at things if you don't already know it. And there wasn't someone there to say, hey, what about like reading this or listening to this? Or I found, this really helped me, because I just wasn't around those people. The people that I was around we were all doing the same things. And there's a lot to be said about that, right? But it's not as easy as just going to find new people, especially when I'm not changing my attitude and I'm not changing the things that I'm doing. I'm just continuing the stuff I did yesterday and the stuff I did
Yeah.
last week. So, there's a process to that. And without knowing any of that, I just felt like I had to just do it without any knowledge. And when I started to get into podcasts, I couldn't talk to my buddies about journaling and about self-help and about, hey guys, what's the coolest new self-development, self-help podcast to listen to? Like, are you kidding me? A construction site? I'd get my ass eaten out. Just I'd get beaten up, or like not physically, but just that mental thing I did not want any sort of backlash about. So I couldn't talk about it. And
Yeah.
School of Greatness as my example, I just like he was interviewing celebrities. I felt like the Kobe Bryant stuff and Terry Crews and some of these different people that were on this show. And I'm not a pro athlete or, an actor, but just knowing who these people were felt like I could relate to them at least a little bit. And
Yeah.
hearing them open up about their vulnerabilities and their backgrounds and their stories and the things that had nothing to do with the sport they played or the movies they were in made those people real to me. And then I felt like, you know what? Like I can start to get into the Andrew Hubermans and the Caroline Leafs and the different doctors and professionals that were speaking about the stuff that related to the people I felt like I could relate to.
Kind of led you to those different people. That's great. I mean, anytime you can connect with like it's funny just the way that things lead off into different directions, right? It's like, oh, I heard so and so speak on this podcast. It has nothing to do with this, but I'm gonna go check out their other stuff. And oh, look, they have this other stuff. I think that could actually really help. So that's, I mean, that's great. And you're right. There is a huge mentality. First of all, around drinking in construction. I remember one of my very first jobs. It was for a general contractor, and the VP of the company, large company, worldwide company, would walk around with two handfuls of beers with the, his fingers in the, all the a beer here and a beer here and a beer, and be like, beer for you, beer for you, beer for you, beer for you on a Friday afternoon. And it's just like, it's hard to say no to that. I said no plenty because I'm not a huge beer drinker, and they drank some stuff that I didn't like. But I'm like, that's such a mentality of, well, of course everyone wants this, So being in the middle of something like that has got to be really difficult. And then the mentality of just, you keep feeling like you can't talk to your peers and your coworkers about some of this stuff for fear of retribution. I mean, it's not job retribution in that kind of sense, but it is a little bit of maybe somewhere between razzing and retribution.
Yeah, and there's a point where you're trying to fit in too, right? Like you're trying to be part of that team. You're trying and if you're gonna turn that down, like it can be a lot to, on even your future in that with that company if these people don't feel like you want to be there. So like, there is a lot of different challenges that come in, and I had my own version of that as I worked through it. But like, for that example, like when that boss comes around with those drinks, like it's almost like, you have to, and the important thing is you don't have to. You can definitely not, but there is a lot of pressure for people in that moment to just play the game.
Yeah, it's a huge amount of pressure, especially if you're the new one in the office.
Yeah, or like the junior, the apprentice.
Yeah, of course, because you want to be in front of those people. It's the VP. You want to have that interaction with the VP and not have it be a negative. Yeah, exactly. I love this comment though. Bitemark says he accepts the free beer and takes it home to make beer bread. Oh, is that not what you meant? I love some beer bread. It's good. We have a cousin who makes all kinds of like jalapeno cheese beer bread and cinnamon whatever beer bread, and it's so good.
Awesome.
So Bitemark also has a question in the chat. She says, what is your opinion of mocktails and the various other non-alcoholic options that are becoming available? Appreciate that question.
No, that's a great question. Something that was something that I didn't want to get into right away, because I wanted, with the habit stuff, I wanted to just get away from it entirely. And in the beginning, like let's say about 9 months, I think I got through about 9 months, and I was like, you know what? I'm confident in the journey now. I can try this, and I had my first one, and since then I've tried quite a few different ones, and they've really stepped up their game. I know at least where I'm from here, there's a lot of different options. There's a lot of different, 0% and mocktails, and I don't have one nearby me, but there's even establishments that are opening up that are just like basically a bar with no alcohol in it. They've got all these different mocktails and really dry atmosphere, and I think, like, I remember my grandmother, and I mentioned her a little bit in the book because she just had her thing. She just the back of she was like the most excited when her grandkids turned of legal age, because then we could bring her beer. She could ask us, because she didn't drive, so she would like, oh yeah, are you in the neighborhood? I'd love a visit, and could you buy me a case of beer? Could you bring it over? So I mentioned her a bit in the book too, because it made that alcohol environment more acceptable. But as she was a bit unhealthy, she still had to have her beer, but she relied on these old Labatt 0.5 from the grocery store, and I remember trying some, and they were not good at all. But no, now the mocktail environment, it is great, and like I've gotten to a point where, like, if I go out to the bars or something with the guys, or weddings or whatever, I'll do that. I'll have a soda with lime or lemon, or I'll have the, if they've got a 0% option, or, just to be in that environment and have one of those makes it so much easier to maintain if you're not drinking, or if you just want to change it up. If you want to just not have alcohol all night, you can still be, involved and drink these things that aren't really going to make you feel like crap the next day.
Yeah. I did just find out that White Claw, which I like White Claw makes the non-alcoholic version, which I had no idea. Their cans look totally different. But I found that out. I was at a work function last week. I was traveling, and they had White Claw, and I was like, oh, that's a weird looking can. And one of my coworkers was like, yeah, that's the non-alcoholic version. I was like, Oh, I had no idea. No clue
Yeah,
that they made
there's a
something
lot of
like that.
companies. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
companies that are into it, and it's great because I think they're just learning that more people want that, and
Yeah.
they're not putting out this garbage anymore. Like they're actually putting in a good amount of effort that they taste good. Like I went to a hockey tournament this weekend and I threw a bunch of zeros in the cooler, and another guy grabbed one by accident, and I got halfway through it before he realized there wasn't any alcohol in it. So it was kind of a neat thing to see. I
Yeah.
didn't do it as a joke, but it's kind of neat thing to see that, like, people aren't noticing it,
Mm-hmm.
because then it helps with, if you're in that environment. And like I said, I didn't want to do that to myself or my own habits in the beginning, but if you're in that environment and you need a substitute, I mean, they're doing a good job to put something out that people like.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a great comment too. I like that the designated driver or anyone else that isn't drinking for whatever reason has more options than just water. Yeah, because you're stuck with like water, tea, or soda most of the time, and it's kind of a bummer. Like you can order a Shirley Temple or a kitty cocktail, but now you've got more options, which I think is really wonderful.
Yeah, and the first time I ordered a virgin cocktail, so a cocktail without any alcohol in it, in front of my construction buddies, that was a big moment
Oh
because
yeah.
if they didn't have a 0% beer, you could order, in Canada we drink this Caesar, which is just a Bloody Mary but with clamato juice, and you could order a Virgin Caesar. It doesn't have vodka in it. But you don't want to say, can you make me a Caesar without vodka? Oh, a virgin. Yeah. So they say that in front of a bunch of construction guys. It was a funny moment. I was pretty confident in the journey at that point, so it didn't
That's
bother
good.
me, but it really could have.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, as you're on this journey, was there anything that was particularly helpful as far as strategies or techniques or just things that you did that were effective in helping you break that cycle and improving your mental well-being around everything you were going through?
There definitely was. I think the biggest thing, as I got into changing habits, was just being accountable and being consistent. And the way that I did that without even realizing it was as I started to work through the days to get through the 30 days and to keep track of the next 28 days. I was doing it on the calendar. So I was circling every day as people do. And as I started listening to more podcasts, I was hearing about habit structure and lifestyle change, and learning that, I forget who said it, but basically 100 days was the magic number for changing a lifestyle. And I really started relying on this 100-day thing, and I was working on, sometimes I was working on like three or four things at a time. Like, I wasn't happy with the way, like, my dental health and brushing my teeth twice a day, so I was like, I'm going to do this for 100 days, and morning and night check mark at the top and the bottom, and getting through that 100 days, and then just stopping tracking to see if this thing would stick. And all the while I'm not drinking, and I'm, circles for more water and another mark for something else, and all of my calendar was just full of these little marks. And part of my, like, anxiety and stuff in the beginning was just like, if I didn't want anybody to, if somebody saw that calendar, I didn't have to tell them what I was working on. I didn't have to explain it. I didn't have to,
Yeah.
feel that again, that just I get that judgment, like, oh, what do you mean you're not good at this, or you don't drink enough that, or you're drinking too much of this. It's like, I don't have to tell them. I can make it up. But keeping track on that calendar and seeing that growth, seeing that many days in a row, and getting to the end of the 100, and like I'd go to bed and be like, oh, I didn't brush my teeth, and I'd get up and go and do it. And it's just something that I had to do now. And I've really found a lot of success in just using that calendar to mark these days off, and
Hmm.
then doing it for the 100 days. And honestly, it depends on the habit too, because like there's things that, like drinking, I wasn't ready at the end of 100 days. I got to the end of March, a little bit into April, and I was like, you know what? Like, what if I could make it a full year? Like, I've never done this in my life. I'm third of the way through, and I just really used that, that same structure and keeping track on the calendar to just like, I'm gonna do this for the full year, and it's gonna make me, I'm gonna feel so much better. So yeah, to answer your question, it's just being consistent, and just like planning it for a period of time.
Hmm. I feel like the calendar is a great visual of just like this. You can look back and literally look at your progress. And there's plenty of apps and stuff that you can use too, but there's something about it being on a written calendar that you can flip back through and be like, look at this stuff that I've had this progress on. Um, I mean, it's the same with reading versus e-reading, right? There's a feeling that you don't get when you're doing it online or when you're doing it on your phone or whatever. That whenever you're writing it down, it hits different, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and like whatever kind of calendar, right? I was
Mhm.
buying these inspirational ones that had like pictures of mountains on it. And I bought the mountains calendar because I was every month I could see that mountain and I didn't have to tell anybody, but I'm seeing that mountain like this thing I'm trying to climb. I'm like this like better version of me I'm trying to create is like that mountain. So every month I turn the calendar, I'd write the new numbers down of what I made it to, but I'm seeing that new mountain like I'm going to beat that mountain this month or I'm going to, just like pumping myself up by the thing I'm looking at. So whether it's like the mountain or you can get calendars that have that like motivational stuff right on it, or
Mhm.
maybe it's you just make a calendar of your own pictures. You can do that online in a few minutes, and it's like whatever that vision is, create a vision board, if you will, for the kind of things you're trying to eliminate or the things you're trying to create, and
Yeah.
just have that in front of you. I've found it very motivating, and it was definitely one of my biggest tools.
Yeah. Yeah, and just being able to visualize. I think that's great. Now you talked about, you didn't feel like you could get peer support. You weren't surrounded by people who were going to be supportive, and you haven't mentioned therapy or like professional counseling yet. So I'm assuming that was not at least part of your early journey. But I know for a lot of people that is something that does come into play. Is that something that you're exploring now, or at any point along your journey? Did you consider like a therapy or counseling or anything like that to help you?
Um, I didn't at the beginning. It is something I'm doing now. But in the beginning, I thought I had to do it on my own, right? I had that
Yeah.
mindset, and it was incorrect. So anybody listening, like, don't feel like you need to do this on your own because it's very hard. Um, but that's just where I came from, and that's
Mhm.
what I felt like I had to do, and we struggle a lot harder trying to fix it ourselves. So,
Yeah.
but that was just how I felt, and I had, to kind of help. Like I got that therapy in the beginning from the content I started to listen to, and using that journal as that outlet, and following the inspiration that I was, because it just changed the way I felt and thought about things. I have an hour commute each way to work, and I just got tired of the same music, the same songs, and I used that commute to start listening to these people that I was learning and finding out about through these podcasts, and then I was listening to a couple episodes a day, or I'd finish a new audiobook every week, and all of a sudden I'm learning what fixed and growth mindset is. I'm learning what different diet things are, and I'm learning Atomic Habits, James Clear, and all of these things that would help me get that form of therapy, because it was a form of therapy
Yeah.
even though I wasn't going to someone direct. And for someone like me that was coming from an environment where I felt like I had to fix it myself, I could get that therapy in that way without having to talk about it yet.
Mhm.
I could learn some of these things, and it isn't a complete fix, but there is a lot of benefit in at least being open to the kinds of things that the people are writing about and talking about. Even like this conversation, it's just being open to that, to realize, what, that makes sense to me. That is something that I felt. That is something that I relate to, and I need to do more research, because what's the rest of this thing gonna say, or what else might I learn? And I really opened up a wormhole of information when I started branching out from all the stuff that I was absorbing through these interviews.
Yeah. And not that your journey has been anything except for what it should have been and what it needed to be, but like imagine if you had done that earlier. Imagine if you had started with that kind of support around you, how much better it could have felt for you along the way.
I know, and that's so true. And no matter what we believe in, if it's whatever religion or the universe, just any kind of spirit, like whatever that is to each of us. It's, there's got to be, a reason for some of the stuff that we go through. And a lot of what I'm kind of believing now is that I needed to get through that on my own,
Yeah.
the way that I did, one, for my realization and my growth, but also to be able to talk to who I used to be. So anybody that relates to where I used to be, that thinks that they can't ask for help or that needs to fix it on their own, to realize that, there is still ways to do it. There is still things that you can do if you're not ready to talk to somebody. That doesn't mean you have to just keep going the way you're going and keep doing what you did before, right? We can, it's almost like that message now is to just to reach out to that person that feels like I used to.
Yeah. Well, and I think so. I got two thoughts kicking around in my brain. One of them is that earlier today, this very same day that we were having this conversation, I was talking to someone on Twitter and we were saying like the reason that it's good to share your story, if you're comfortable sharing your story about what you struggle with, not just what you're good at. Social media, we put on this front of everything's happy hunky dory. But if you can talk about what you're struggling with and how you're dealing with it, you never know who's going to see that and either interact and suggest something that might help you, or just see it and be like, I'm going through the same thing. I'm not alone. And so being able to share what you went through it's kind of that like, now your story can maybe touch people where other people's stories would not. And I think that that's just really, really neat. And it's part of the reason that I do what I do as well, and just share the things that I struggle with and the things that I have faced and how I have gotten through those, is like, that way people can know that they're not alone and you can get through it in whatever way serves you best. So, yeah, I mean, I feel like there is absolutely a place for therapy if you're having a problem with drinking or if you want to change a habit. There's different ways to approach it, and this is just one way. So I appreciate you sharing that with us here today.
And to add to that, thank you. There, to add to that, like I didn't grow up with religion, right? And I thought that all the programs for drinking were religion based.
Yeah.
Like I'd have to buy into that program in order to get the help from that program, and that was wrong. There are those types. AA is a big one, and it helps a lot of people. Like I couldn't have told you in the beginning the difference between being religious and being spiritual, but there's a massive difference. And while I didn't feel like I could relate to those programs in the beginning, there are many others, especially since COVID and the growth of online and all of the
Oh, yeah.
platforms that you can talk to people online. I just didn't know. So until I learned better, I couldn't do any better. And we all have our own version, and we may not relate to 100% of what someone else is going through, but there's something we can get out of every story.
Yeah, absolutely. I really feel like, and I know AA is not specific religion, but just the fact that a lot of those programs are held in churches, I wonder how much that turns some people off from even attempting to go to them, which is such a shame, because there are great programs out there. And there's another one that is more religion focused. It's something recovery, at least here. And of course, that's going to vary wherever you are, but AA is the big one that most people are going to be familiar with. And it's just because it's held in a church. Churches are there to serve a community, and sure, they might have some pamphlets or something that are going to try to get you to come to service on Sunday, but that's not what those programs are about. So it just...
Oh, and there's a lot of great people have gotten a lot of great help from
Yeah.
them, and you have to use what you can, but it's not the only resource, right? If
Yeah.
it's, and like there's a lot, like it would have been a hard thing for me to, I mean, it was a hard thing anyways, but if I had to go and be a part of a church and go, like, that would have, and it made it so much more difficult to me mentally, that I didn't do it, right? I
Yeah.
didn't reach out, I didn't use that support because the church element. And I have to believe that there's other people out there that feel the same
Yeah.
way. So sharing my thoughts is not to knock that program, it just wasn't where I felt I was.
Absolutely. Yeah. The other thing that I want, now it's only halfway there. That's okay. It'll come back if it was important for me to talk about. Oh, so the other thing, I mean, it kind of goes to what we're talking about now with AA. I'm sorry, hold on one second. Good night. Oh, he was at my door like something was wrong. I was like, dang it. But he's fine. He was just saying goodnight. Celebrate recovery. Yes, that is the one I was thinking of. Thank you. um, so yeah, going back to talking about both therapy and kind of these programs and everything, I think that access and just the ability to get to some of these resources could really be a little bit of a block to some people. And so that's another reason that I think it's great to kind of share your story, is just even if you don't have the privilege and the access to a program, to a therapist, to professional counseling, or if you're in a situation where you don't have that peer support around you, you have folks in your life who are not supportive, who are actively against you stopping drinking for whatever reason, like acknowledging that, I think, is really important, just that not everybody has those same kind of opportunities and support networks. So yeah, hearing your story and just how you went through it, not alone, but without some of those things, is really powerful.
And there was definitely, my share of people around me that just didn't, they weren't ready for me to change, right? Like there was, at one point, my own brother asked me if I wanted to go to his place for a drink, and I was like, "Oh no, I'm good, thanks." And he's like, "Oh, what? You haven't got your coin yet?" And like, that's such a awful statement, really. But
Yeah.
he was in a position where he didn't understand, but felt like I made it, or felt like he needed to add that in there. And he's fine now, but like in that moment, like I don't think he realized what kind of anxiety and what kind of pressure that put on me. And I was in a friend of mine's wedding. It got delayed because of COVID, and then once things opened up again, I was in his wedding, and every function we got fitted for the suits, and we got went to bachelor party. And I had already committed to doing this for an entire year. I got past my 100 days, and I'm going to do this for a full year. And then it was like, "Oh, will you be in my wedding? It's in October, September." And so that's 9, 10 months in. And I'm like, wow, like I'm doing this for a full year, and every function, you better fucking drink at my wedding. You better
Uh,
drink at my wedding. And it was like, I'm trying to be this different thing. And I'm taking this break, 30 days, 60 days, 100 days, a full year. I'm doing it at different milestones. And then I'm like pressured to be this way at his wedding. And to be fair, like we were drinking at my wedding, right? It was many,
mhm.
like a few years before 2010, but like this was just something we did together. Different drinking stories, and you better fucking drink at my wedding. Like it was just such a high pressure. It gave me so much anxiety, like especially coming from a place where I was like the biggest supporter and hosting and doing all the cheers and salutes and whatever. And it was like I gotta show up this way at his wedding. And it was just like even up to the wedding day, it was like, "Oh, well, you're still not drinking." And he gave out these flasks and drinking cups to the wedding party, and like it was just like such a massive thing. And it was a lot. It was a lot. It was a lot for me to try and deal with and show up a certain way, and still, and like while I was journaling, and this is what like a lot of what I had kept in my book is like how I managed to, and what I felt, and all these kind of situations. And yeah, the support system may not always be there, but at the end of the day, like people get so used to how we show up on a day-to-day basis, and it's not that they're not there to support us, they just don't know how, because they
Yeah.
don't realize that we're going to be different now, or that we don't want what we wanted yesterday. So while we're trying to learn about ourselves, not that everybody is the same, but some people may just throw that comment out and not realize what it means to you.
Mhm. That's an immense amount of pressure. Like, you better fucking drink at my wedding. That's an immense amount of pressure from a friend. I would be pissed.
Yeah, it was tough.
Yeah. And there are the other comments, like the one that your brother threw out, maybe that was just a flip comment, but it could also be approached from a point of curiosity, and you never know where someone's coming from. Like, is it a flip comment, or are they really asking, but they're just asking in an awkward way for more information and more just kind of feedback. So yeah, that's intense. So now that you're kind of not done with your transformation, but down the path of your transformation, maybe, how has your transformation affected your life in general? And I'll say, especially since we are just talking about your brother and kind of your friends, but especially your relationships with family and friends and coworkers as well.
Um, I mean, relationships have changed, and I think in the beginning, we always hear that you're going to lose friends. You stop drinking,
Mm.
you're going to lose friends. You start to not even drinking, you're going to change anything in your life, and you'll stop having the same friends. And it's not as quickly as that, right? It's not like you don't want to drink today and like, or you're not going to do this thing, and now all your friends are all gone. It's gradual, and
Yeah.
honestly, it's gradual in a normal way. I found that just like anything, you go to a different high school from somebody, like you grow apart naturally. Like you stop working with someone, and you may not just hang out all the time, or you may not hang out at all, and you just grow apart. And I think, as I felt it was something that was going to be more instantaneous, I just naturally grew further apart from people. And while I naturally grew further apart from some people, I grew closer to other people. And as I mentioned earlier about how, you're more like the people you surround yourself with, as I started to change and I started to be more open and work on things, and, I started being around more of those people. Like, I was meeting people at different functions, or, I started to do some running, and, I'd meet some people in that environment. And, I started to spend more time with some of the people that were I was doing the same things with. And, I still see some of the same people. I still have some of the same friends, and we almost have more to share now because we're not seeing each other and doing the same things every weekend. We could talk about different things, how the families are doing, or what are you up to now. And I think it's just something that naturally happened, and that support system changed and gave me more support for the things that I was now doing instead of the things that I used to do.
Hmm. I, I think it's a really, and this is something that comes up every now and then, but I feel like we don't talk about it enough, probably in a very pointed manner. Like as adults, first of all, it's hard to make new friends unless you're involved in something. And then it's a little easier. So the more you can find a similar interest group or something like that, that's gonna, like you're talking about running and finding people through a running group and everything. But also the other part of that is that friends are not forever. Like I have two friends who I've had since grade school. That's it. My graduating class had like 300 people in it. I only really talked to two of them, and even those two are pretty rare these days, to be honest. And so most friendships are not forever. They're not meant to be forever, but it can feel like, oh, shit, I haven't talked to so and so in so long. It's not just that. Oh, we had a big fight, we're never speaking again. Or oh, if you do this, we're never speaking again. It's not that. It's just that natural cycle. And I'm glad that you put it that way, because that is definitely something that I don't think I talk about enough with my kids, at least. And it's not something that I was taught either. Like I always thought, oh, well, you're friends because I saw my dad, fireman, has this group of buddies. He's still friends with that group of buddies because they worked together for 25 fucking years in a row. Like
Mhm.
that's a stronger thing. I am not going to work at one company for 25 years, and I'm definitely not going to work with the same people for all of those 25 years. And so that's not something that's built into every job. But growing up seeing that, it's like that was my expectation, and it does not meet reality.
Mm.
But friendships do have kind of that natural cycle, and yeah, it can maybe speed it up if you're doing something different in your life, or if your focus changes or your interests change, that can definitely speed it up.
Yeah, and it's not to say that you have to lose friends because you don't have the same job or the
Yeah.
same, things anymore. Because, like anything, it takes work, and it takes work
Yep.
from both parties, and you can still maintain as many of those relationships as you want. All
Hmm.
right, like there's some people in that'll come into your life, in my life, that you want to put that work in, and there's
Yeah.
others that just they don't reciprocate it, and that's okay too, because it's just what they say, a reason, a season, a lifetime. You'll have
Mhm.
these people in your life for any of those things. And the big thing for me was coming to terms with the fact that it wasn't going to happen
Yeah.
instantaneously, and I might not know who I'll grow apart from. Like, I didn't think about that in the moment. It just, over a period of time, I look back and like, oh wow, like we really only had drinking in common, or we really only had working together in common. But once that thing was removed, we just kind of grew apart. And we're nice to people. We're still, say we're friends. We just don't see each other as often as we used to, and
Yeah.
that's okay, because that's just, I think, a natural cycle.
Absolutely. Now, what about like more immediate family, kind of kids and wife? And you mentioned a little bit of that in your bio, but how did those relationships change for you?
Yeah, so I actually started to realize myself becoming what I didn't like growing up. I found myself
Yeah.
creating that eggshell environment, and my
Mm.
patience level, yelling, just different things that I didn't like. That was the example set for me. I found myself becoming that, and it was a moment that kind of hit me as well at the end of 2020. Was like, what am I doing here? And it kind of came more as I learned more about the different habits and stuff, and the books and stuff I was listening to. Like, I listened to John Gordon's Energy Bus, and it's a book that has both an adult and a kids version. And I found there was a part in this book that he talks about the greatest golf swing, and it's basically that one swing in a round of golf that keeps you coming back. It doesn't matter how you did for the rest of the round. That one swing, it's like, yeah, this is why I play this game. And the context is, he uses it to think about your day, where it's that one thing that happened in your day that keeps you coming back. And I brought that home because we were having, my family, we eat together at the dinner table, but my kids, there's 3 kids under 10, and my middle child, he's just a little more anxious, and he's having some hard times, and there was just some negativity and bitterness, and I listened to this book, and then I come home and I'm like, you know what, we're gonna try this now. We're gonna go around the table, and we're just gonna talk about our favorite thing. We're gonna do one favorite thing each. And at first it was a struggle. I had to, like, I don't care, like, did something make you smile today? Was there your favorite color on something? Did just anything you noticed? And it took a lot of coaching in the beginning to get everybody involved. And I had some really hard days, and there was days I didn't want anything to do with it, but I just knew I had to keep it up. And it quickly grew. And my middle child, among everybody, was just the biggest cheerleader for it. And it didn't matter if we had a barbecue with 30 people, he would go around the room and get everybody to talk about their favorite thing. And we still do this 2 years
Awesome.
later. And it is like such a cool thing, because there's a list of things. And some days, if we're in a hurry to go somewhere, we don't not do it, but we're like, okay, guys, just pick one thing, because they find so many of these things in a day that is their favorite. And I would have never found that if I wasn't open to listening and learning and growing the way that I am. And that is as a major example. But, like, I'm bringing a lot of these things, and higher patience levels, and different coaching techniques, and working with their growth, and my relationship with my wife, and just different things there, where if I wasn't open to these new things, I would have never found this person that I've become.
Hmm.
And to kind of add to that, it's like, we're never going to become these people if we're not open to growing at all.
Yeah. Now I have to consider now I have to consider if I can add the favorite thing. I have a list of questions. It sounds bad to say it's a list, but it is a list of questions that I do with my kids every day after school. Um, I wonder, all right, so the questions are, what's something good that happened today? And I wonder if that's close enough to the favorite thing. Like, what was your favorite thing in your
Yeah.
day? So we do what's something good that happened? What's something bad that happened? And I think that's a really important question too, because like you have to acknowledge that even if you had a perfect day, something bad happened. Like teeny tiny. Again, these could be like, I got chocolate milk. That was a good thing that happened today. They were out of chocolate milk. That's a bad thing that happened today. Like they could be teeny tiny things, but adding, I feel like maybe couching it as what's your favorite thing that happened today Should I change that one? Potentially. I'll have to talk it over with the kids. But we do what's something good, what's something bad, um, what's something you hope happens again. Now I have to think about what else we do. What homework do you have? And then what accomplishment or what do you want to be acknowledged for? And so we do those questions, and it's like, okay, those are, I feel like those set us up for a good conversation, because I was at the point with my kids where it was like, how was your day? Fine.
Hmm.
Like, come on, give me more.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It creates that conversation, and
Mhm.
there's a few other ones I've heard along with the ones you mentioned. Like, what are you grateful for? What's something
Yeah.
that just
Yeah.
happened that you're grateful for, and one on the other side that I really appreciated was what did you fail at today?
Mhm.
And it kind of put a different spin on it, because if we start talking about our failures, that we normalize failing, and we do so in a way that we learn from it, because if we can realize something
Yeah.
we didn't do well, or that we didn't that we failed at, what did you learn from that, right? So there's a lot of these different conversation starters that especially with my daughter, who was just born months like this September before I started this journey. She was born at almost the end of 2020. Like, I've seen her growth. She's now turning 4, and like she went from just repeating what the boys were saying to like having her own favorite things in
Yeah.
context, and then remembering that. Like, it's just been such a cool growth moment for us, and it's really a good example of how it's just me changing has set up the environment for everyone around me to kind of change as well. And I know, my wife, she's actually tried the favorite thing. She's a manager. She's tried that favorite thing at one of her work meetings. She could just read the room, and they were doing a Teams thing, and she just didn't feel right at the end of the meeting. So she had everybody go through and say, "What's your favorite thing today?" And it just picked everybody right up. Just
I
changed
love
the
that.
entire like end of that meeting, and it's a really good one.
Yeah, I that's a great thing to do for a work meeting if you've got a group who's going to be receptive to it. That's awesome. I love that. So, if you were back, if you could talk to your younger self, or if you could share any advice or encouragement for listeners who may be struggling with similar challenges related to habitual drinking or their mental health while drinking or a habit change, even, what would you say?
Well, at first, I think I'd admit that we don't have to excuse change because of cost. I think a lot of people are
Mm,
afraid because, therapy costs money, or,
yeah.
the programs cost money, coaches, even buying a book, or listening to something. If you don't have a subscription, like sometimes it's just the cost. But, um, there's a lot of free content, right? There's a lot of free
Mm,
content, and if you even like, because everybody that has social media, like, just start changing some of the people you follow, right? Follow somebody that has an influencing, that is doing something that you want to do. If you want to be a runner, then follow someone that's into running. If you want to work out at the gym, do that. Like, you can find somebody that's interested in anything you want to create for yourself. And those things, you're already paying probably for the self-service. They're going to be free. You're not paying specifically for that. That's something small you can start to change, is the things that you're reading, the things that you're
yeah.
inputting, because then that starts to change your mindset, right? That's how I did it without even knowing it, starting to bring those things in. And it was really started to change the way I thought and felt about certain things. So, you know, change those inputs to change your thoughts, but don't feel like you have to pay a lot of money for it, because there's a lot of free content. You don't have to stay stuck because it might cost you money, because then once you get to a point, you start to learn more about yourself and about what you might want to become, and maybe where you came from. Then maybe that money spent is money better spent, because you're going to get focused attention, you're going to get focused help, and you just learn with it as you go. So that's a big one. And then for somebody starting out, you're never stuck. The biggest mistake I ever made was telling myself, this is just who I am. This isn't
Mm,
just who you are, this is who you choose to be. And the second that, and this isn't me telling everybody to stop drinking, because everything that I did, it applies to anything I want to work on. I just mentioned brushing my teeth, but if you want to drink more water, you want to read more books, like, it doesn't have to be drinking. It's anything that you want to change, just be open to it, start to learn more about it, and you'll create that opportunity for yourself.
I feel like if you're adding, if you want to be a runner and you add some runners on Twitter or Instagram or wherever, just seeing that content could be like a real motivator. But also I want to point out that I've had a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm not on Twitter anymore. It just turned into a cesspool." And I'm like, my feed didn't, because I follow specific people. Like, I'm very intentional with who I follow and what my feed is flooded with. And it's all mental health, positive, kind of like good. I find the people who are putting out content that I agree with and content that is uplifting, because that's what I want to see when I open Twitter. And it's like,
Mhm.
if you open up something that used to bring you joy and it's no longer bringing you joy, either leave it or change who you're following. Kind of change that
Yeah.
algorithm, force that algorithm into a change, because it can get really stuck with suggesting that content on your For You page that's in a specific vein of partying or of complaining even. And it's easy to get stuck there and say, well, this is what's on my For You page. It's what I meant to see. It's what the algorithm knows me already. But if you just do some searches, it'll change even stuff like that, where it's feeding you content that is more aligned with what you want to see. So just to pile on to what you're saying there, because I think that's really important, that you don't have to be on specific sites. And if you're going to be on them, they should be contributing to your mental health, to your mindset, and make sure that they are. Because if they're not, you can change that. Don't
Yeah,
click
that's the
on or
that's the
look at
easiest thing.
things. Yeah, don't click on or look at things that make you angry. Engage with the content that brings inspiration. The algorithms will give you more of what you engage with. That is an excellent point, because if you watch a video multiple times, it'll count it towards your algorithm. But if you like it or star it or heart it or whichever app you're on, or comment, that's like double influence towards your algorithm on all these different platforms. So really good point. I love that. That's an excellent point. So
Yeah, and how
engage with
quick
what you
and
want to see
easy is
more of.
that?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
How quick and easy is that to just like open up the thing you're going to open up anyways, right?
yep,
You're going to open up Instagram anyway, and you're going to see all this inspirational stuff pop up, and these things that like are maybe more towards the person that you'd like to be. So where is your mind going to take you if this is the things you're reading and the things you're inputting, right? You're going to start to feel like that person. You're going to start to believe that you can. You're going to start to do these things, and that's all part of the process. And one more thing I'll add to that, and it goes to your other question, is you start to change. It's going to be hard, but you're supposed to suck when you get started on something new,
yeah,
right? The hardest part for me was realizing that, like, I'm not just going to be good at it right away, it being whatever it is you're working on, right? So it's going to be awkward because you're doing something different, and it doesn't matter what it is, right? It could be reading, it's going to be awkward. So don't just read one book and not be a reader anymore. Get through a few. Don't just go for whatever it is. Don't do that one thing the one time and think, "Oh, I'm not good at it." You have to stick with it, right? Do it for that 100 days. Use that as your thing. And 100 days can feel like a lot of pressure. So maybe just start with the first week, right? Or just do it tomorrow and then just build on it.
yeah. Uh, you got to look at yourself like you're a 4-year-old if you're starting a habit, because four is, I mean, I guess probably more like 5, but like 4 or 5 years old is when you start to read. And think about how difficult it is for the first year for a kid to learn to read. It's so difficult, but you would never tell them you suck at reading. Like, you would never say that to a 4. I mean, I might, but no, I would never. But my 10-year-old did really struggle to learn to read, and it was about finding something that engaged him in the right way. And we tried many, many different things, but not one time did I look at him and say, "You're awful at this." It was, "Okay, that didn't work. Let's try a different method. Okay, that didn't work. Let's try this over here. Okay, that didn't work. Let's try this over here. And I did all kinds of Googling, and now he will stay up. What time is it? It's almost 10 o'clock. I know he was in his room reading, and that's why he came to me and said goodnight, because he was so tired that his eyes were closing or he was having to read something. So now he's a huge reader. And it's like, that's 5 years later. 5 years ago, I would never have told him that he was a bad reader, ever. So you got to give yourself that same leeway and that same runway to really kind of get into something. You're 4 years old again with whatever you're trying to do. Consider yourself to be 4 years old.
Yeah, and to add to that a bit further, like I was 36 when I started this. So like the person I created was 36 years in the making. Is it fair for me to assume that it's going to be something I'm going to fix overnight?
Yeah.
No, it's going to be a bit of a process. Does that mean it's going to take 36 years to fix it? Absolutely not, right? It's up to the individual and what it is they're working on and their commitment to it, what that takes. But, if you don't get it in a couple days, it's normal, keep with it, try something different, just don't give up.
Yeah, absolutely. Coyote, I love this comment. I've learned to be content and enjoy things in life based around my disabilities. Like I love audiobooks now. Yeah, you gotta lean in to what works for you. And I really feel like you have to not tie yourself into one way, because you have to give yourself that runway to explore and try things and fail and be like, well, that method didn't work. But it's not you that's failing. It's the method that failed you. Like I think that's an important distinction too. Like not everything is going to work for everyone, but that didn't work for me and that's okay. I'm going to try this instead. And just kind of give yourself the grace and the space to figure shit out, because it's not easy. It's not
Yeah,
easy.
that's right.
So how can someone who doesn't have a negative relationship with alcohol or does not recognize that they have one, because that's entirely possible as well, how can someone be supportive of a family member or a friend who is trying to stop drinking, or who has recognized that they have a negative relationship with alcohol and is trying to change that?
I think this fits in any sort of spectrum with mental health. Is a lot of mental health is not something we can see. There might be signs and symptoms of what someone's going through, but like a lot of that is in our own minds, right? It's how we feel. It's how something makes us feel. It's what happens in a certain moment. And how we can support someone is really just be there for them and believe them when they say something makes them uncomfortable or makes them feel a certain way, and be facilitate more to their environment than your own environment, because we're not all going to feel the same in the same. So like if you're deciding you don't want to drink anymore, and my biggest thing I realized was people didn't care what was in my cup, right? They were just trying to do what was they were used to doing. I cared what was in my cup.
Yeah.
I thought I had to do it a certain way, and I thought I had to, drink what everybody else was drinking. But like, it's in our own minds. But like, if we're supporting somebody, just don't make it weird. Like I was at a restaurant with some friends and I ordered a 0% something, and a buddy of mine felt the need to explain to the server why what my background was that I was ordering this thing. And he was hammered, but that's fine. But like, I don't know, he just felt like he needed to explain it for me. And we don't need that. It's already awkward enough a lot of times when we're doing something different. The best way to support it is to maybe ahead of time. Like another buddy, it was at the bachelor party for my buddy's wedding, and he was like, hey, like I'm gonna go order some shots. I want to, is there something else that you want? Is there, I just don't want to make it weird. And it was off to the side. It was, I didn't ask him to do that. I wasn't there so people could like make it weird for me, but it was cool that he at least thought ahead to just not make it weird. And I think that's the best way we could support someone, is just recognize that, they may be going through something. We may or may not know what it is, but just be supportive of each other.
Mm-hmm. I feel like, especially in the shot situation, like that was really well handled.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was a lot of foresight, especially if you've already been drinking. And then you're like, we're going to do shots. And a lot of the time You want a shot? No. Okay. You want a shot? Yes. Okay. You want a shot? No. Like, just kind of do it that. But also, like, I was a waitress for a while. I would not care. I don't give a shit why you want what drink you want. Like, all I care is
Right?
if you are ordering alcohol, I need to see your ID. Thanks. So
Yeah.
explanation totally not necessary, but yeah, I think just supporting people through whatever they're going through and talking to them also and saying, "Hey, I know you're doing this. Is there anything that I can do? Is there any way that I can make it easier, better for you in either a specific situation or just in general, like as a friend?" I think that's really important, just to show that support.
Yeah, and just don't push each other. Like if
Yeah.
someone's in this example not drinking, like don't push it on them. Okay, no problem.
Mhm.
If you have something else to offer, get something else. But it could be anything. If someone's feeling anxious in a moment and they can't do the thing that you're doing, if it's go up on stage or whatever the environment is, don't push anybody to do something they're not ready to do yet. You know,
Yeah.
let
Yeah,
believe them
absolutely.
when they say it.
Mhm. I try to respect their life choices and try not to be an enabler or an influencer. Yeah. And just recognize also that you don't have control over other people's behavior. Honestly, you really don't. But you can, like, providing a support is much better than providing pressure one way or the other. Like, support their choices no matter what they are. I mean, safe, sane, consensual. Okay. but
Hmm.
but support their choices, and and then that means that not trying to apply that pressure of like, you better fucking drink. That's just such a shitty comment. I can't get over
Yeah.
it. So
No, and then like I had committed to the full year, and when I started, it was everything I could do to push it off as long as possible. So really, my
yeah.
start date was like January 4th, because the first, and then that was a holiday, and the second was still a
Mm-hmm.
weekend, and because the first was on the weekend, we got the Monday off in lieu, so it was like the Tuesday, the third or fourth by the time I got started. And my buddy actually, who was the groom, and he's the groom in this book, because wasn't putting any names, which I'll add to after. But New Year's Eve, he's handing shots around. He's handing this bottle around, and people are taking drinks out of this, whatever. And he sees me. I was like, oh, it's not New Year's yet. Never mind. It's just that added little comment. It'd been like the full year, and I'm creeping on like the full year of not drinking, and then reflecting in my journal what that meant to me and how much like it just. And then I had that last dig from him the night before and a
Yeah.
couple of days before, and to get to the book, and just to add to what I said, it was important to me when I wrote it that it wasn't calling anybody else out. So even
Mm-hmm.
though that happened, it was more how I felt about how that environment and what
Yeah.
I did through that environment than it was who the bride or who the groom was or my parents or my grandmother or whoever I kind of talk about in my experience. It wasn't the only one I had of a name is my wife, and it was she's really great about the whole process, but it was kind of just to make it more personable, at least in that
Mm-hmm.
sense. But I didn't call anybody out in it because it really, like I said earlier, it wasn't about anybody else. It was how I felt I had to maintain, myself and what I was working on, and, to really just showcase that I was going through this thing and completely changed how I felt about a lot of the things I thought were so true about myself in a way to, kind of, and then to put it out there in a format where I could show like my vulnerability and the things I went through for someone, like I said, my old self who just like might need that version.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So you talk about your book a little bit, and I'll share a link to that again in just a second. But what motivated you beyond just like, oh, I've already got all this stuff written? What motivated you to start sharing your story publicly, and what message do you hope that others will take away from either your book or just talking on podcasts like this? Like, what message do you hope that people are going to hear?
Excuse me. Well, about 9, 10 months in, so the wedding had happened, and a friend of mine at work, we were on a guy's trip, and he just genuinely asked me. He said, like, how's it going? And I said, oh shit, I could write a book. And like an expression I've used before just to explain how much of something that like happened and whatever, it's just like using that expression to answer his question was like, oh shit, like I really have written
Good.
this book. Like
Yeah.
I've journaled for 10 months about this journey, and I've got all this content about like the things I've kind of gone through and the situations and this wedding and all the things. And like, how selfish would it be for me to sit on that when I could have used that when I got started? And I really thought about, my own journey and what I'd gone through, because it's the only one I can relate to, right? I'm not trying to be anybody else. I'm not trying to say anybody else needs to be like me, but, relating to what I had gone through was like, this is something I could have used. And, it was in that last month or two of what I had committed to the full year. And I'm still not drinking, and I'm still, doing different growth things, but like for the sake of the journaling and the book for that moment, it was like, I took the next month while I kind of got through to my goal of January 4th to get a full year, to kind of reflect on getting to the point where I felt I could share it, because like it's pretty vulnerable, right? Like,
Hmm.
not we don't often like to discuss the things that make us feel weak, and the things that, that make us stand out in how what we might think is a negative way. And in the most positive way possible, for me to showcase that, so someone else feels like, hey, you know what, I relate to a lot of this stuff. And if it's drinking or not, like it doesn't have to be, even though that's where my story is. It could be anything else, right? It could be, social media, and you're just on it too much and you're following this stuff and you can't get off your phone. Like, okay, well, let's phase out, do the 30 days, 100 days, and document on the calendar. Like, I tried so many things with the same, system, to just try and change that habit. And it really does work for everything that I tried. Um, and that's kind of where I'm at now. It's like, promoting the fact that we're not stuck, promoting the fact that like we can do it if we want to, and just starting small and working through this process. Anybody can change, and like we said in the intro, where it's like not this big, like I didn't have to have something, drastic and happen, and I didn't get to a point where someone else forced me to do it. While there might have been harder conversations, if I stayed on the same path, like it was to a point where I could fix it. And just working through the small stuff, and now encouraging people to realize, like I did, you don't have to stay stuck. This isn't who you're supposed to be, and you can
Hmm.
change it whenever you want to. You just have to want to.
Yeah. I think that, we talked about this already, but just the having that extra piece out there of, this is how I did it. Surely someone else is going to pick up one small thing from your story, and that's what's gonna stick with them. But maybe they pick up the whole story and they're like, this is perfect. This is exactly what I needed. And there's everything in between, right? So that's great.
Mhm.
Uh, so here's a comment from the chat. I'm sad to say I asked my friend and roommate not to bring a trigger into the house for 5 days to help me break my addiction. The best they would do is put it in the other fridge. That's not working for me, and I got in trouble for getting into their stuff. And they called my addiction BS, even though I said it wasn't, and I'm asking for help. That is really difficult. That's a really difficult situation of like, not only someone not supporting you in the way that you're asking for them to support you, but also kind of actively working against you in some ways and then blaming you. Like, that's
Yeah,
pretty
that's
shitty.
tough. I think a lot of the times it's the people trying to deal with their own insecurities. It's like, if you get better, then it's going to make me look worse.
Mhm.
And if
Ooh.
if someone feels like they can keep you where they are, it makes them feel better about themselves, right?
Mhm. Man, I would not have thought of it that way. If you get better, it makes them look worse. But
Yeah.
it's to themselves, right? Like, that's all internal to themselves. Most people aren't.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. It's like my brother's comment about the coin. It's not acknowledging the fact that I'm working on myself, or that I'm doing something. It's like, trying to knock me down a bit, to say like, oh, you didn't have your coin, you can't have a beer. It's like I reach that point, and I have permission to be, cool again, or I participate again, when meanwhile, like, people around us as we decide to do things, they're just not going to understand.
Mm.
You know, they're so used to that old version of who we are that they're not ready for it yet.
Yeah.
And you know, not that everybody's out to get us, because I do think people will grow as we grow, but like they just don't know this new person that we are yet. Like I didn't know this new person I was going to be, and how could I expect everyone else around me to get it? You know, even as my buddy who like the groom in my story, like we still talk to each other. We have a good relationship, and he's come around, you know, very well. But like, you know, in that moment, he just didn't know what I was trying to become, right? He just
Yeah.
knew the person that I used to be, the person that was at my wedding and the person that was at all the other drinking functions and would, you know, take the biggest swig of the bottle sometimes. It was like, you know, he just knew that version. So it was tough for him to realize what I was trying to become when I didn't even know how to explain that to him.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, and that's just another challenge I think we have to kind of work through is like, you know, the people around us may not be there to try to pull us down. They just may not know us any different.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's their perception of you and their perception of themselves with you as well. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's Coyote. Coyote says, thanks for sharing your story. I feel the truth in that. Yeah, absolutely. So we are coming up on the last couple of questions here. So if anybody who's here has anything that they want to get in, comments, questions, or otherwise, feel free to pop those into the chat and I'll make sure to get them read out. But Sean, I have a couple of final questions here. The first one is, what is your favorite life hack?
My favorite life hack is it's got to be my calendar.
Yeah.
Just keeping track of the things that I'm working on, and not only that too, right? Just keeping track of the good things that happen. Like I've been doing some running and you know, I've been in a few organized events, and I just keeping track of them on the calendar, being excited for different things, and really making that place my you know, my life hack, something that makes me feel good when I see the mountains or the inspirational content, or you know, the notches that mean whatever to me. It's just a, you know, a really cool thing that's helped me through these things.
Yeah. That visible tracker, I think, is such a hack that I not a lot of people recognize as being valuable, but try it and see if it works for you. You know, we talked about doing stuff that if it works for you, great. If it doesn't, that's fine too. But see if writing stuff down and tracking it would work, because if something hasn't worked, if nothing else has worked, why not give that a try too? Also, I just think it's cool to have that thing to flip back through. All right, well, with that, it's time for our magic moment. And I have a magic wand here. So if you could wave a magic wand and eliminate one common opinion, misconception, or theory surrounding mental illness, disabilities, we're talking about mental health, what would it be?
I think um, I would I think I would get rid of the misconception that we know how to fix it, or that we
Mm,
know what the solution is. You know, we often in this society want everything in an instant and right now. And while that would be nice, some things take time, and we just may not know what it is we need yet to give us the best support. So I think you know, the thing I would look to get rid of or fix is that, you know, the thought we need to fix it right away, and that we know what the answer is.
yeah, that's a big one. Well, I am going to post your socials one more time. So if anyone is looking to connect with Sean, make sure to click through Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, LinkedIn, book, Instagram. All those links are about to be hitting you again. So, and then Sean, I'll just open it up to you. If there's anything that we didn't talk about or that you want to throw out there, you just take the mic for a minute while I post these links.
Oh, I think we covered a lot, and you know, I mentioned running. I challenged myself to do something I'd never done before. It's kind of a theme that I'm going with now, is just trying things that I would have never done, and I ran in a few organized events last year, and have since completed 2 half marathons. And while a lot of even myself would feel like I didn't belong there, and I've actually been on a podcast talking about how I didn't feel like I belonged there. So there's links to that on my website. But you know, we can belong anywhere we want to be, And while we aren't going to be great at everything at first, I feel we just need to give ourselves a chance to try things we've never tried before because we might really like it.
Yep, absolutely. And congratulations, well done. Hats off to you. We were talking about this before we started streaming, but my knees could never. So I'm always just so impressed by folks who do the running. And good job. I mean, that's great. It's a good thing to challenge yourself and meet those challenges, and you can challenge yourself and not meet those challenges and learn some things from that too. So that's excellent. Well, I appreciate
And you know,
you. Oh, go ahead.
sorry, I was just gonna add it's a lot of pressure to feel like a marathon or half marathon. You know, we just got to get good at putting our shoes on, right? Just put the shoes on, and maybe then you want to go for a walk, and whatever it is, just think about it like that. Work your way up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you taking the time and having this conversation. I think this was a really, really fun one. And I want to make sure to get to this comment because Bite Mark says, I just want to say thanks so much for being here. Lots to think about and perhaps a new book to read. So thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate you being here and just agreeing to spend this amount of conversation currency with us today.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I appreciate being here, and for everybody following along and adding their comments and questions. It's been great.
Yeah. All right, chat. Give me just a second to disconnect with Sean. I'll be right back and we'll be playing some games. So stick around. Don't go anywhere. All right, that was a great conversation. I hope that y'all enjoyed that. Couple reminders so I don't forget to say them later. I won't be here Wednesday. I am going on another work trip, unfortunately. It's a short one though, so I'll be back Friday. I'll be back on Friday and everything will be all good, but I won't be here on Wednesday, which is a bummer, but you know, sometimes work be that way. Okay, we're gonna play, I think we're gonna play some Manor Lords. All right, so in one of my saves, I did get up to 4 territories, but it's all been like fighting to get them. And so I wanna do a new save where I try some things out that I think are gonna help me do stuff faster. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna play some Manor Lords, and I'm gonna try some like, not cheats, because it's all game mechanics, but I'm gonna try some fiddly things. I'm gonna change my title to trying some fiddly things. Trying some fiddly things. And we'll update this to Manor Lords. Coyote, thank you so much for being here. I hope you're doing well. How have you been? What you been up to? Now, what time is it for you? It's early, isn't it? I don't remember your time zone necessarily and the conversion of it. Oh, 11:22 p.m. I don't know why. I thought you were somewhere else. Like Australia or something. Okay, well it's not that bad for you then. Now, are you a night owl, or do you prefer daytime? Morning time. I'm going to end the stream on YouTube and I will be